So what I'm doing here at the moment, if I can make some space, is I'm, for want of a better word, tearing holes in paper. Each one is just inspired at the moment of breaking the paper. I have no preconceived ideas of how the shapes are going to be. Prior to all my artwork, I meditate and and I take it sort of to a different level to be inspired, usually from what I'm thinking about. I'm very eclectic in what I like to listen to music-wise, what I like to read, what I'm interested in, history, culture, travel. These all have an impact on what I do and how the final art piece, whether it's jewellery, sculpture, or a 2D painting, how that sort of manifests. I think all that history of where I've lived, what I've seen, what I've thought about, that all comes into it. So yesterday, when I was doing some piercing of paper, so I don't know if you can see, there's just holes, and they come up from the surface of the paper. I like texture. I realised that this was probably from when I was living in Sudan, and the marks on the faces that were raised, the tribal markings that were raised on the faces, and I think that's where that's come from. I had a sort of little epiphany yesterday of where that came from. When I did a very large water-like piece, which I still am working on those pieces, I very much wanted them to be immersive, meditative, so that when you just look at it, it changes, it reflects, just like water is constantly moving. And I had this just urge to do this painting. And it wasn't until a few months later that I realised that I still had that sort of deep love of being completely submerged in the water. I was a scuba diver quite a long time ago, in my 20s, and it was that aspect that I was trying to sort of bring to the fore. So I don't always have a preconceived idea of what I want to do, and I'm not really interested in making pictures. That I like a sort of story behind each piece. I suppose it's the way I choreographed when I was choreographing in my 20s. So I always had to have sort of a story line that would go through, so that the whole piece would have some kind of flow to it. And then I transferred that when I went to work at Trafford Hall up in Chester, and I was in charge of the gardens, and the same with the plants. I would like to create little stories so that when you walked around the garden, you would feel the changes and feel the atmosphere change in various parts of the garden. So there was a sunken garden where you would walk in and it would slowly get calmer and calmer. So you'd have the smells first with all the herbs. Then you'd come round to a sort of more shady area where I just planted sort of whites and greens. So it was a very calm, very meditative, with a place to stop. And then coming out of that into the sort of pinks, very calmly coming out of that into a sort of rather pretty, for want of a better word, area. So the light, where there's more light, a little bit more light, and then eventually sort of coming round to a sundial which had these vibrant oranges. So it had a sort of flow to the whole piece, but that again is a bit like a dance. So my background in dance, again, my background is in dance, so so it was sort of flowing through the story. So you have these sort of undulations going on of the, you know, the sort of smells coming in, and then the calm, and then coming out and into the light, and then that vibrancy of this sort of crescendo at the end. And I like those stories in my head before I do something. So I don't necessarily put them down on paper, although I tend to more and more now in my sketchbooks. I'll sketch something and then I'll piece various things together. But it isn't until I actually pick up the piece or start to do the piece, I don't really know where it's going, and it could change completely. But I think, that I have a fundamental idea of what I'm trying to say in my pieces. And more my pieces have become about my search in my life. I meditate. I'm constantly trying to find my place in this world. And I've got children, so so that can sort of, you know, that can bring different aspects into my work, where I'm trying to sort of help them but not allow them to find themselves. And I hope in a way that people can grasp things from my work that might resonate with them from where they've come. Everybody comes with a different perspective. And I think I really see that with my children, you know, and also depending on where we were living and at what age, their personalities. What I suppose I'm trying to get across with this work here is that we're all very, 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 very different, but fundamentally we're all connected. So even though these pieces are going to be very different in their own right, there's a cohesiveness to them, there's a connectedness. And I'm trying to do that with the threads. So some of them I'm stitching with silver. It's like silver thread. I don't know if you can see that. There is a silver thread going through here. The piercing, again, I think the piercing has come about because, well, we're always being pierced every day. There's something comes in, and we don't necessarily have to heal those wounds. We live with them, and they make us, I think they make us more unique and beautiful. And I've said this before in some of my work to people, where we all go through something, and it's how we react to that and how we come out of it. Hopefully we come out of it, and hopefully we come out of it a better person, a much better person. We're more empathetic when we've been through trauma, more understanding of people. We give a little bit more. And I think in this world where people say you're bad, or you're this, you're that, we're labeling and telling people they're good or telling people they're bad from a young age as well. Just, I think what I'm trying to say is we're not perfect. None of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. And we're all beautiful in our own right, but we're also connected. It's that feeling of connection. So individuals within a whole, a collective, like the drop of a water, the drop of a water in the ocean. It's a drop of water on its own, but it's within the context of the ocean. And we have to live within this ocean, and we have to realise that even though we are individual, we are connected, and maybe just reaching out occasionally when we're not in a right place can help, or for us to be more observant of people, and maybe they're reacting in a way because they're going through something, and maybe it's up to us to reach out to them, or just to be a listening ear for them. What's some of what goes in my head? If you get very difficult to explain what's going on in my head.